Hello, welcome everyone to a brand new episode of Monday Night Therapy. I'm your new host, Minnie Hunt, stepping in to bring some positive vibes to your favorite therapy session of Cornhusker sports. And with me, you all may remember our favorite Badonk Raider. I guess we'll call you Todd. Welcome, Todd. No, you will never. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Doing real good.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know that I told you we're going to talk about some portal additions that we've had. And I also wanted to kind of get your take on the wrestling, Nebraska's wrestling, because you recently went and watched them, didn't you?
Yeah, I was down there on Saturday. They wrestled Minnesota. It was their first Big Ten duel. So
yeah,
I hadn't had a chance to see them live this year, and that's kind of unusual for me to go this far into the season without seeing a match. So, yep, I was able to get down there.
Nice. So what all did you see? I mean, we have a lot of returners, right?
Yeah. It's a pretty veteran team. I was a little skeptical because the week before they had wrestled up at Northern Iowa and had wrestled poorly. Now, I mean, I think some people underestimated UNI. I mean, they're a good team. But geez, Nebraska wrestled really bad. And Dylan Gunther, our writer who covers wrestling for Corn Nation, he'd indicated that it was just really kind of a lethargic outing against them. So I really had hoped to see something better with Minnesota. Minnesota always, when they come and wrestle at Nebraska, I don't know if there's some kind of history with Coach Manning and Coach Igum. Brandon Igum is the head coach at Minnesota, but boy, there's always a little bit of side tension, if you will, between the coaches. So that's kind of worth the price of admission. But also, the person behind me said that there's a good crowd, a good sized crowd for a Saturday afternoon where there's other things going on, high school wrestling tournaments all over the place. But the guy behind me had made the comment they ought to give half the gate to Gable Stevenson because he was there. So I'll just really be brief about that. I really wanted to see Gable Stevenson wrestle again. And for those of you that don't follow the sport that close, Gable Stevenson is a heavyweight at Minnesota. He was granted a final year of eligibility with all these different, COVID years and Olympic red shirts and all of that kind of stuff. He actually had one more year of eligibility. So he came back after basically, I think he kind of got ran out of the WE or WWE. I don't know what exactly happened there, but he'd signed a contract after he won the Olympic gold medal in 2020, and that just didn't work out. But he was there, and he made really quick work of Harley Andrews at heavyweight. But Nebraska looked tough. I was very pleased to watch the way they wrestled against some good Minnesota guys, and Nebraska ended up winning the duel 21-13. What's significant in addition to that is that was Coach Manning's 300th duel victory as a coach at Nebraska. So 300 wins, that's nothing to sneeze at. I didn't realize that the guy's been there for 25 years.
Oh my gosh.
Boy, time really flies. But Coach Manning, he's just full of energy. He's a great coach, great personality. It's always fun to listen to him. He comes and talks to some of the boosters beforehand. They have a social, so he usually comes up and talks for about 10, 15 minutes. So it's always fun to listen to him and great fun. So yeah, wrestling team's off to a decent start. We'll see how they do. They have Penn State Friday night, 8:00 in Devaney. They're trying to pack the house. Penn State is just a monster. So I don't think I'm going to be going down, but we'll see how it goes.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, that I saw the advertisement for the wrestling match coming up, and how they're calling to get, all the Husker fans, load up the seats. So, but you're saying they are going to be hard to beat, Penn State.
Oh yeah. I hate to be Mr. Doom and Gloom. It's possible Nebraska doesn't win a match.
Oh my gosh, really?
I hate the matchups just aren't very good. Now, I certainly can be wrong. Brock Hardy, he may get a win in there. Ridge Lovett, he could get a win. But boy, I think other than those two guys, wins could be pretty tough to come by. So,
my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other night on the Thursday night, whatever the name of that show is, I forget.
Five Heart Podcast.
Kidding. Yes, the 5 Heart Podcast. Anyways, we were talking about getting excited about wrestling because, it's the season. And we were talking about some of our favorite wrestling movies. Okay. And somebody brought up Iron Claw, which I think is a fantastic movie. Do you have a favorite wrestling movie?
There's only one wrestling movie.
Oh, tell me.
It's Vision Quest.
Oh, I saw that. Because somebody mentioned it from 1985.
That's probably about right.
Yeah.
Madonna was a new kind of on the fringe of breaking out a little bit, and she was in that movie. And
I know that part was great.
Yeah. No, that movie, I mean, if wrestling fans, I mean, that's their, I don't know what.
That's their go-to.
That's their go-to. That's, Vision Quest is it. So, yeah.
Were you a wrestler?
Yeah. I spent a good portion of my life involved. Fred knows of me through his cousin. My brother wrestled Fred's cousin a little bit, and we have another person who shows up here every once in a while, Donnie Dre. Don and I, we kind of battled a little bit when we were kids, back before we got into high school. But no, I started wrestling as a kid, and I wrestled all the way through high school. I wrestled my freshman year in college. I wrestled at the University of Montana. And then I coached. I was a assistant coach when I was in college after I transferred from Montana to Nebraska. Then I was a head coach for quite a few years, and I was a wrestling official. So, I never
knew this.
I was all in with wrestling. So,
well, we can't just leave it at you talking about the one match then. We need to hear a lot more. Okay. Don Dre, you mentioned him. He says, Todd, what do you think about the new 3-point takedown rule?
I'll be honest. When I heard about it, I didn't like it. I mean, I thought, why? They've been doing 2 points for a takedown forever. But you know what? I do like it. And after I've seen it, what it does is it rewards the guy for taking the risk to get the takedown. It rewards that. And it used to be that it also kind of rewards the guy who's trying to make a comeback at the end of the match, because as he's trying to fight back and accumulate points, it's he's trading 2 points for an escape rather than a point. So I like it. Don, I was surprised, but I think it was a good move. Now, I'm not so sure about the way they count back points. I'm not sure about that, but I do like the way they are given 3 points now for wrestling. for takedown. Excuse me.
It's hard to follow when you're new to the sport, what all the points are, and all of that. So,
Well,
I mean, hopefully we'll learn something here tonight, guys.
That back in the day, now wrestling's changed a lot. There's a lot of scrambles. There's a lot of awkward positions anymore. I mean, it's different than it was 25, 30 years ago. But one of my, I guess, coaches as a little kid, we worked with him a bit when I was growing up. His name was Paul Havoc. In fact, he was one of my heroes growing up. He was a heck of a high school wrestler when I was a little kid. And, as a little kid, you go watch, the high school teams wrestle, and Martin Iberg, Paul Havoc, those were a couple of guys from Oakland High School that were good. Anyway, Paul Havoc ended up coaching. He coached in your state. He was a head coach down in Arizona for a while.
Oh.
But he says, people make too much of it. He says, if you're new to the sport, it's kind of hard to follow how they get points. But here, I'll simplify it for you. There's two guys out on the mat. Whichever one's beating the hell out of the other guy, he's winning. And that's all you need to do. Whoever's beating the hell out of the other guy, he's the one that's winning. So that's an oversimplification, probably.
It might be, especially with all the different rules that they've added now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, okay. So thank you, Husker Chuck. He says, Todd can teach Minnie all the submission holds. What's a submission hold? What is that?
Well, in some martial arts, they have submission holds, which, because of the pain that they inflict, the person who is on the receiving end will tap out, and they will submit. And you see it quite a bit in Ultimate Fighting, but it's very popular in jiu-jitsu and some of the other martial arts. Now in wrestling, in the wrestling that we do in this country, there are no submission holds. They've tried to, in the last 70, 80 years, they put rules in so that it was safe, and you're not out there to intentionally injure someone, or you're not supposed to be. But I do remember as a kid, my grandfather, who was born in the early 1900s, his hero growing up, this is ridiculous. I'm probably even talking about this, but my grandfather's hero growing up was this guy named Farmer Burns. And Farmer Burns in the early 1900s, the 20s, the 30s, back in that era, he was a barnstormer. And that's when wrestlers would travel the circuit, and perform at fairs and that kind of stuff. And that was legit stuff. I mean, it was pretty brutal, etc. Anyway, I remember as a kid when I had started wrestling. Now, my grandfather at that time was in his 60s, but I asked him, I said, Grandpa, what are some of those old holds that they don't let you do anymore? And he put there's this key lock where they put pressure against your elbow, and he put that on me, and that hurt like hell.
Oh my gosh!
But there's a few things, and there's pressure points. My brother was really excellent at finding pressure. There's different pressure points on your body where if you jab your thumb or something like that, it just hurts like hell. And my brother was really good at disguising those, kind of getting away with them, if you will. So, yeah.
Well, somebody here knows what you're talking about. Well, Husker Chuck says Farmer Burns was born in 1861.
Yeah. Well, I was off a little bit, but I know that my grandfather in the early 1900s, Farmer Burns was his. And actually, he passed on to me. I've got this book that's barely held together. That's a first edition book of Farmer Burns teaching Wrestling, and it's got old photos in it. And, the paper's all kind of brittle and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I've got a first edition book that my grandfather had with Farmer Burns and wrestling techniques. So that's kind of cool.
Yes. Wow. That is so neat. That really is neat. Oh my gosh. Okay. Vince Watson wants to know, Todd, are you a fan of Tyson Terry doing both wrestling and football, or do you think he should stick to one or the other at the next level?
That's a good question. And I'm going to say off the top, Tyson Terry is going to Nebraska to be a football player. And I think Tyson Terry needs to focus on football. Now, Nash Hutmacher last year, he wrestled, but, he'd also been on the football team. He'd established himself. He had a starting position. They say that the plan was to take a little bit of weight off of him anyway. Nash won some matches. He was an excellent high school wrestler, and he was able to hold his own against some good college heavyweights. There's the heavyweight at Iowa right now. Came to Iowa on a football scholarship. He wrestled as a freshman after football was over last year. This year, he didn't play football. He only wrestled. That kid's a world champion in age group wrestling. Ben Cuter is his name. He was a linebacker, a little bit different build than Nash Hutmacher. But, I don't know what's going to end up, if he's going to stick with wrestling or if he's going to try to do both again. But Tyson Terry, in my opinion, needs to be a football player. And if after he's established himself and, he kind of figures out where he's going to be, on the depth chart and what his playing time is going to look like, then maybe he might want to take the opportunity to wrestle at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Husker Chuck, another good comment. He says Nash was not as dominant in football this year. Maybe the weight loss, maybe the notoriety, or maybe it was the scheme. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much lighter Nash played this year. I think, if I'm not mistaken, when he played the season before he wrestled, I think he was playing like at about 330, somewhere like that. I don't know where I don't know how much he weighed this year when he played football. So, I think with Nash, I think that was just kind of a little fire that burned inside of him. And, I think Manning has had Coach Manning's had a good relationship with the football staff. Every coaching staff that's been here at Nebraska, as long as Mark Manning has been, he's always had a good relationship with them. So I think it was kind of, a way to help the wrestling program out a little bit too.
Well, I just looked it up. They have him listed at 310. So about 20 pounds lighter.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I honestly think with Nash, and this is, I'm not a coach, a football coach, but, I think Nash's biggest shortcoming as a defensive lineman was his foot speed, lack thereof, and some of his agility. And that didn't hurt him being on the wrestling team. In fact, that might have been another reason why he wanted to work out with the wrestling team, was perhaps to try to enhance a little bit of that. There is, especially with linemen, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, there's a lot of advantages to having wrestled, just because of having to learn how to fight with your hands, which happens, in both sports, controlling your core, controlling your center of gravity, balance, and foot speed and movement, agility, all of that. Tristan Wirfs, reminded me last night when I was watching Tampa Bay play in the playoff game last night. Tristan Wirfs was a hell of a high school wrestler in Iowa before he went to the University of Iowa. And there was a period of time, and I don't want to brag up Iowa. That's the last thing I want to do. But it was within the last 5 or 6 years that the entire starting offensive line at the University of Iowa, all of those guys were state place winners as wrestlers, every one of them. So
really,
yeah. So there's a pretty good correlation there.
That's so interesting. That really is. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of start comments I have from earlier. And Vince Watson says, King Badonk himself.
Yeah.
It's an endearing term that we have for you.
It is endearing. Yeah. So I'll pay a little closer attention now. I will say this. I didn't, Gable Stevenson has a badonk. I mean, holy moly. I said to my dad when we were watching him, he was absolutely dismantling.
Who?
Gable Stevenson, the heavyweight
yeah.
He was absolutely dismantling the Nebraska wrestler. Gable Stevenson weighs 285 pounds, and he has the agility of someone that weighs 140. He is just an absolute freak. And when we were watching him, I said to my dad, I'm not so sure you could wrap your arms around that guy's thigh. And my dad kind of chuckled a little bit, and he said, you're probably right. He said, he was put together. He really was. But his power base was all from his waist down. So, that translates.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. Okay. I know just because I've been around a few wrestlers, I've seen, what is this? Pit Snipe Husker says Todd's got the ringworm scars to prove it. I know they get like something with their ear a lot of times. That's right?
Cauliflower ear. Yeah.
Okay.
Pit Snipe, I never had ringworm. I never, ever had ringworm.
Why would you get that?
Pardon?
Why would you even get it?
Oh, geez. Wrestling. Here's the thing. God, I hate to even bring
Do I want to know?
It was wrestlers in the last 30 years a lot of wrestlers have really struggled with some skin diseases. And when I was in high school wrestling, you never saw it, you never heard of it back in the 70s and the mid 80s. But geez, in the late 80s, all of a sudden you started seeing kids that had ringworm. It's a parasite. It's communicable. And you would also see, kids with herpes simplex, like the cold sores. And it got,
oh my gosh,
impetigo. It was a mess.
Yeah.
And so they completely had to change an aspect of the sport to clean up the skin diseases. Whoa. And a lot, now there's, unfortunately, there's some abuse to that, but Pitt, I never had ringworm. I do have cauliflower ear on my left ear, but not such that you would notice. You'd have to grab a hold of my ear, and if you grabbed a hold of my ear, it feels like there's a chunk of concrete in there.
Is there? Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow. Glad we figured that out. That was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I already took this one, and let's see. Joel Tilson wants to know, what do you think about a freshman and a sophomore NIL cap at $200,000, and after sophomore year they get one transfer? Oh, he's talking about like with football now. That's actually not a bad idea.
I don't, on the surface, Joel, I don't think that sounds like a bad idea, but I don't know where 200K fits because there's no disclosure on what any of these players are
I
getting.
know.
And until there's some kind of regulatory body or whatever where they require that information to be public, I don't know where you set a cap. But let me just say, I think, okay, I saw another comment. Yeah, you're going to have to disclose to the IRS, but I would, I want to circle back to that in a minute, but I'll finish this point. I don't think that I don't have a problem with a cap, but you're going to have a contract, because if you don't have a contract, then you're I can't think of what the terminology is. You're discriminating against players because of their age, and that's not going to hold up. You're going to have some kind of a contract or an agreement where everybody signs off on that, so that you can put regulations in place. After sophomore year, they get one transfer. I don't know how I feel about that, but I guess this is my own personal opinion, guys. I think I don't have a problem with them transferring and being eligible one time. If they transfer again, I think they ought to have to sit and wait. But my opinion is that if coaches can just leave when they want to, and we all know players aren't committing to the university. Very few of them are. Very few commit to the university. They commit to the coaching staff. And if coaches can pick up and leave, I don't have a problem with the players being able to do that either.
I'm glad that this question was brought up, because what is going on in college football, and I know we're shifting gears here. We still want to talk about wrestling, but with all of the rule changes that take place year to year to year, whoever manipulates the rules being changed the best gets an advantage. Like, for instance, with college football coaches being able to leave and take all of their staff with them and all of their players with them, that benefited Indiana this past season. And because of COVID and having the extra years of eligibility, that benefited Michigan 2 seasons ago. So it just seems to me like whoever can manipulate the rule change to benefit them the best gets that advantage. And it's so sad.
Well, there's a pretty fine line in some respects between winners and losers. And oftentimes it's those who can look deep into those rule books and figure out what's an interpretation that I can use to my advantage. And, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but we've seen things where it's perfectly legal to do something. And so a team will do it. And then the league says, oh boy, we didn't see that one coming, and boom, they immediately change the rules. So you can't exploit something like that. But, with NIL and with the portal, that's a combination that has created chaos. And the NCAA would not get involved in the beginning. They washed their hands of it, and it turned into the wild, wild west, hoping that politicians would solve the problem. And the politicians aren't solving the problem.
Nope. It doesn't apply to them. It's so interesting that we have this like huge storm that has been developing in college football, and something has to happen. I mean, now we have the what is it? The profit sharing. that's going to be taking place. Now, doesn't that have to be disclosed?
Yeah, I think it does. But, Vince Watson's got a question here. Why don't you pop that up? And that can kind of lead into
Is
this.
this one?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
going to be really honest. I have not paid attention to the nuts and bolts with the NIL stuff like John and some of the other folks, at Corn Nation have. And the profit sharing part of it, it is definitely going to change things. But what I can tell you is I can't say for sure, Vince, whether it's going to be part of wrestling. But what I do know is that the last I heard, profit sharing will be part of some sports, but not all sports.
That's what I heard.
And who knows what that's going to happen. But I want to, since you mentioned this, I was at, like I said, before the wrestling meet on Saturday, Coach Manning came out and talked to a group of people here. And an NIL question or two was brought up. And to put it in perspective, Coach Manning said that they have raised short of $250,000 for NIL for wrestling. Now, I don't know what that all means. Is that money that has been contributed directly into, 1890 earmarked for wrestling? I don't know. But the comment that he made was they have raised just short of $250,000 for wrestling. And, we hear those kinds of numbers thrown around for a player.
Yeah.
In football and basketball. Now, here's something else. And wrestling might be a little bit unique with this. And I'm not sure how many people are aware of it, but Nebraska also hosts what's called the Nebraska Regional Training Center. That's affiliated with USA Wrestling, which is the organization that governs amateur wrestling in the United States, international style wrestling, youth wrestling, etc. And those regional training centers are where athletes that have completed their college eligibility, they go to regional training centers and they can be paid stipends and they can be in the wrestling rooms with the college athletes. They can put on camps, but they also train and they eventually compete. And for years and years, Coach Manning and his team, coaching staff, support staff, they've raised money for that regional training center to support graduated athletes. Right now, Liam Cronin is there. Peyton Robb is there. Christian Lance is there. There's a few others there. And so Coach Manning's kind of torn here. We've been raising money to support these guys so that they can be in the wrestling room and work out with our college guys. But now we're being asked to raise money to pay the guys that are in the wrestling room. I don't know if I'm explaining that real well.
No.
But it's now, instead of trying to fill one pot, they're trying to fill two pots. And so that's created some challenges as well.
Wow.
So
that does sound challenging. Okay. Pit Snipe Husker, he says, how odd that an institution established around enforcing the amateurism model totally sucks at enforcing any kind of athlete profit taking. And it's because it's just evolved. I mean,
yeah, it's a travesty. Amateurism, I might be overstating this, probably overly dramatic. Amateurism died with the dream team. And when the Olympics decided they wanted to capitalize on professional athletes, and that was back at about the time that the dream team played in the Olympics.
Yeah.
That's when, at least internationally, the international organizations threw up their hands and said, screw it, amateurism is it's a travesty. And it was. I mean, even back when I was a kid growing up in the 70s, we heard of the, in the Iron Curtain countries, Russia, East Germany, paying their athletes, and that type of stuff. So,
Sure.
and
well, let me ask you a question, Todd. Okay. This goes back to what originally happened with NIL, because I remember thinking, well, if this affects all college athletes, it really isn't fair, because who's going to pay like a women's softball player, to advertise for their shoes or whatever? Don't you think that football should be separate to kind of encapsulize that as its own thing?
we could go down a rabbit hole and never come out of there, but Minnie, I've advocated for 10, 15, at least that many years. Take football off the top.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a time where they could still do that. Separate football, play in this national league, national college league. Let's go back to regional conferences for the rest of the sports.
Yeah.
And, football is such this great big monster. Make it its own.
It is. It's a big monster. And maybe basketball, but they have to, perhaps there needs to be a threshold. Like, once your sport makes this much money, then you are into this other bracket, and that has nothing to do with the school. And because it is so complex now that we have, student athletes that can transfer up to 8 times throughout their college career.
Well,
in 4 years. How do you learn anything? Isn't the goal to become like a professional at something, get a degree? How do you learn anything if you're transferring 8 times?
That's all been lost. It's all gone. And that was gone 10 years ago, 15 years ago. When there's so much money in college athletics, where you have a lot of money, you got a lot of people that want to get their hands on it, and it's corrupted, in my opinion. God, I really.
Do you really think it's corrupt?
I think it is, but I think it's been corrupt for years. I mean, university presidents have sold their souls for all of this money that they can earn, or all this money and all this attention that are brought upon their institutions because of athletics. And there are so many decisions that it's just gone on and on and on, to the point, in my opinion, it's a bit ridiculous. But yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, is this a good point in our conversation?
Well, if you want to move on, let's move on.
I was going to say, I just feel like maybe we could talk about the transfer portal and a couple guys who got in. I mean, the transfer portal is a great thing now. And I get what you were saying earlier about going back to, if you transfer, you have to sit out for 1 year, but that's not the case anymore. In fact, Nebraska just hosted a guy that I'm really excited about. He is the offensive lineman from New Mexico State. Shiyazh Pete. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of him. I've been reading a little bit about him.
Number 71 there.
Yep.
He would be a 4-star transfer, rated 4-star transfer, 6'8", 287 pounds. I mean, he's an immediate, like, plug and play type of guy, and he could play left tackle, blindside. That's where he gets the majority of his experience. So, what do you think about him?
Well, everything that I've heard is that he would be, the icing on the cake. I just saw, again, I don't track it as close as a lot of people do, but I saw that Nebraska's got the 9th rated portal transfer
6.
group in the country, and top 6, okay, and the top in the Big Ten.
Yep.
And then if they could bring in a guy like this, then you've brought in 2 offensive tackles, the Pritchett kid from Alabama and this guy. Hey, let's face it, we haven't had stability or a high level of play at either tackle position for a few years. And I know I got tired of beating up on Ben Hart, so I just quit. But
you don't have to do it anymore. He's leaving.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that would be a real feather in the cap if they could pull in another guy like that. What that reminds me of too is, Nebraska's brought in some guys from the FCS level, and who are all Americans or at least all conference players. And I thought I read that every first team FCS All-American that had eligibility left has left their school to go to a Division I, an FBS program. So, there's the negative side. But the power conferences have the opportunity to upgrade. And if we could get that kid from New Mexico, I think that would be a nice cap on the portal season.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I don't know. They were playing around with the idea that, well, it is actually approved that now we if you came from JUCO also, you get 2 extra years.
The JUCO years do not count against your eligibility.
Yeah. Isn't that insane? So think about that for offensive linemen, especially, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one of our writers at Coronation had mentioned it's been that way for prep schools for quite a few years, and I'd never ever thought about that. And I know that Nebraska, in the last 4 or 5 years, we brought in a couple of prep school players. But that kind of, I don't know. You get 2 years at a JUCO, and then you got 4 years at a college or university.
I know.
Wow.
Because what you need to become a great offensive lineman, well, of course, you have to have the ability, the badonk, the core, but you have to have time to, put that muscle on, the weight on, and you have to have snaps. You just have to have the experience. So that 2 more years of that before it ever even counts seems like it would be pretty beneficial.
I think it would be of great benefit to players that aren't there yet, maturity wise, both physically and maybe with their behaviors and their academic pursuit.
That's true.
And that's going to have to be an area that I think that our coaching staff's going to have to look at a little bit closer. Just a quick little segue.
Yeah.
That's what Coach Bolt and the baseball staff, they've really put their focus on junior college transfers rather than portal transfers. And now this applying to baseball, that only enhances that. I mean, I've got 2 nephews that played JUCO baseball.
I bet. Yeah.
And, you know, and one of them, he coached at a JUCO for a couple of years too, recently. But I haven't had a chance to talk to him since that. I mean, if he would have been able to play his 2 years at Hutch and then 4 years at a 4-year college university, I mean, that'd have been outstanding for him, you know? So.
Wow. That is crazy. So in other sports like baseball, it's really advantageous.
Yeah.
That's wow.
You know, it's what am I saying here? It's going to create some traffic jams, and, you know, just simply because of the number of potential players out there. And I wonder what this is going to do to high school kids. You know, you think about it, if a college football coach, I mean, before all of this portal madness, you know, a Division I football program would bring in anywhere from 15 to 25 new players each year. And the vast majority of those were high school graduates, and sometimes sprinkled in with some JUCO players. And the JUCO players would get 2 years of eligibility usually. And so now, you know, where are these high school kids going to fit in? And where are they going to get experience? Does that mean that the junior college route is going to become a more popular way to get to 4 years colleges and universities? I don't know.
Kind of sounds like it.
You're going to have to be an outstanding high school player to go into a 4-year college or university.
Yeah.
And, you know, even back when Osborne was the coach, you know, they had arrangements with junior college programs where they would tuck a few guys who couldn't get into the University of Nebraska academically. And so they'd make some arrangements for some of those guys to go to junior college and spend a couple of years there getting their grades straightened out. Mike Rozier was one of them. Not uncommon.
Really? Okay. Switching back to the football guy, the NMSU guy. Fred Sacco says it'd be great to get the NMSU kid, pair him with Elijah, Demon in the Streets and Between the Sheets, Pritchett. And who he's talking about is this guy. This guy was a 5-star before he went to Alabama, okay? And he can play left tackle some, but they had him at right tackle. And he is committed for sure. So we're excited to get him. What do you think about this guy?
You know, this is one of these guys where he went to Bama, so you'd like to think he was really, really good. I mean, if he went to Alabama and he started games at Alabama, so you'd like to think he's really good. But in what I've heard a little bit of conversation on Sports Talk, Fred's reference right here, Demon in the Streets and Between the Sheets. What kind of baggage is this kid hauling?
He might have some.
He might. Let's
say that's behind us. That is left behind in Alabama.
It's like I kind of said earlier, Minnie. You put him on one side and you put Pete on the other side.
Yes.
You've got a couple of bookends that could that could lead to some good things.
For sure.
Raiola needs somebody. Raiola needs a little bit better protection consistently. He got good protection, a lot of times this year.
Good.
But some consistent protection, but also just being able to get that running game established up front is going to be huge.
So just a real quick question. What do you think about Gunnar Gatula on left tackle?
Well,
he did pretty good, I thought.
I thought Gunnar Gatula did good for the situation that he was in and for the little experience that he had. I thought he did well. The term that is being thrown out a lot right now is recruiting over the people you have on your team. And so in reality, the coaching staff is recruiting over Gunnar Gatula because they're hoping to bring in a guy that can step in and start. And while that might be discouraging and disappointing to Gunnar Gatula, let's take a step back. Not that long ago, maybe longer than I want to admit. It used to be Gunnar Gatula wouldn't have had a spot on that offensive line until his 4th or 5th year at Nebraska. So they're trying to get old and stay old, if that makes any sense.
No, that's what get old and stay old. That is such a great quote right there for the offensive line. Get old and stay old. Get old from the transfer portal, and then keep the younger guys, keep them, until they're older. I love that. So can I get you, just for fun, we're almost at an hour. Can I get you to rate these guys' badonks? I mean, come on, just for old time's sake.
Well, I don't know who the guy is in the frame here to the left.
I know he's gigantic.
He's got a badonk. I would say that both of these guys, looking at that picture that you had with Pete, I would probably rate his badonk a little bit higher. I mean, you can't. That's not a good view, but you can.
He's 6'8".
He's really thick in his core, and so I would think it'd be. I think he'd be a top 10 badonk probably.
Top 10. Ooh.
Yeah.
And Elijah Pritchett.
Well, he looks a little bit leaner, so I really can't say for sure. I'm going to have to see him. I'm going to have to see him up close before I can pass judgment there. So
okay, that's fair. That's fair. We'll get to see him up close for sure. Yeah. Hopefully at the spring game. Okay. Well, did you want to talk about any other portal gets? I mean, we have quite a few wide receivers that are pretty highly rated, and we have an edge, Williams Nwaneri, that is also highly rated. So did you want to talk about any of those guys? Or?
Well, I think that a question a lot of people probably have is, why so many wide receivers? Why so many defensive backs? Mm-hmm. And the wide receiver question can be answered pretty easily. We have a new coordinator. We have a new wide receiver coach. Holgorsen is going to run. He's not going to run the air raid from everything that we hear, but he knows what kind of receiver he wants, and he wants a tall, physical kind of a guy. Now he'll use the speedy little guys, but he's trying to bring in the kind of receiver that fits his offense. So I'm not surprised they're bringing in wide receivers. Defensive backs, again, we got a new D-back coach with, our former coach, Butler is the defensive coordinator. You got a new coach, and he's going to look at perhaps something a little bit different than what we had in the past. 30-plus defensive backs. When you look at a roster of 105 players, my math isn't great, but 30 plus is, roughly 33 some odd percent in that ballpark. That's a lot of roster spots. But what I think is going to happen is when spring comes around, when they start their winter conditioning, from day one, it's going to be survivor. It's going to be at the wide receiver position, whether you have been here 1 year, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whether you're brand new coming in through the portal. It's going to be step up and prove yourself. And if you don't cut it, then you're going to have to find another place to play football. Right now, there are 16 portal players. I've heard they might bring in as many as 20 or 21. I'm willing to say right now, let's say they bring in 20, just so we have a nice round number. I would be surprised if there's any more than 15 or 16 of those guys on campus after spring practice. There are no guarantees that all of these guys are going to have a spot on this football team. Many of them are being brought in and being told you compete. And we'll see where the chips fall.
Wow. Okay, so spring portal opens up in April. Should be right around the time of our spring game. Are you saying that you think that if these guys don't win a spot, like if they're not playing at the spring game, that they might just go ahead and re-enter the portal again?
Yeah, I think there'll be some of them. But what we also have to keep in mind is when the season starts, and I don't know for sure how far in front of the first game, let's just say in August, there will be a point in August when that roster has to be at 105. Okay. And
July, I think, or it might be August. I'm not sure.
Okay, whenever it is. And we also have to keep in mind that there'll be some freshmen that will be coming in over the course of the summer that will not have had an opportunity to show what they can do yet. So, I don't think when spring is over, they're not going to have 105. They're still going to have a few more than 105. But that's going to get pared down. But as soon as spring practice is over, there will be 20, depending on how many people are I can't imagine that there won't be at least 20 people in the portal.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, did you hear that? Okay, the guy that Holgerson, I don't know if it was Holgerson or Coach Shorts, one of them from Houston had the contact of Jonah Wilson, the wide receiver.
Yep.
He visited recently. He's going to end up being a walk-on because we're over the
really?
Yeah. So
he may earn a spot then, when you see the attrition,
I think really, and that guy's a 4-star wide receiver. And I also read that Fedoni, he's not entering the transfer portal. He's actually training for the draft.
I heard that too.
What do you think about that?
That's one of those cases where it would have been fun to be a mouse in the corner because, Holgerson praised his effort leading up to the Pinstripe Bowl.
He did.
But Fedoni doesn't fit Holgerson.
Okay.
And
I can see that.
It's interesting to me. Thomas Fedoni, when he was a little kid, multiple years he went trick-or-treating wearing a Nebraska uniform. I mean, that's the place that kid wanted to play. I think he's going to be a little bit disappointed when he sees what his evaluation scores are for the draft, potential for the draft. I might be wrong, but Thomas Fidone doesn't look to me like an NFL tight end. I don't think so right now.
I don't think so either. I think Fred Sacco probably hit the nail on the head here and said Fidone and his grandma will be great in the UFL. That's probably a good landing place. I mean, God bless him. He's given his all, both knees, to Nebraska.
Yeah. I mean, he has. And maybe, you know what? I guess there's another way to look at it. You can spin it a different way. If he doesn't do it now, when is he going to do,
That's right.
He bunked. I mean, you look at and I'm horrible with names. The girl on the woman on the women's basketball team, the young lady from St. Francis, who just tore her knee up Saturday morning at practice. The third time since she's been at Nebraska that she's torn an ACL. Your heart just, you just, I don't know, your heart just breaks for people like that. And that's kind of the way I am with Fidone. He did not have a good season, as good as I think anybody had hoped. No. And in large part, it's due to those surgeries.
Those injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would have done better at, a lesser conference for sure. But we love him for all that he's given us. And then I just wanted to address this real quick. Charles Hollett says, Minnie, are you paying too much attention to the number of stars assigned to some of these players? Not too much attention. Enough attention, I'd say, because it matters. For years and years, I felt like Nebraska, we would get a lot of these 3-star players and we'd be all excited. And if we got a 4-star, occasionally we would prop them up, and that 4-star generally wouldn't pan out because they would get injured or they would transfer somewhere, or something would happen. But now, I want our roster to be made up of mostly 4 and 5 stars. Sorry, that's what I want.
Well, the top teams in the country have a lot more of them than what Nebraska has.
We're getting there, though. As you mentioned, we are 6th ranked in the transfer portal. So that's pretty good. We're ponying up. Well, I don't know if I have anything else that I wanted to add tonight. That you have educated me so much on wrestling and submission holds and badonks.
Badonks, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Minnie, it's been a pleasure. I will share this real quick, if you don't mind. I'll just
please
share this. When I was at the wrestling meet on Saturday, at the gathering before the match, they were up in some lounge in Devaney. Really, really nice place. They bring in catered meal, and then, like I said, Manning always talks. And Troy Dannon was there. And that's the first time that I have seen Troy close enough to go up and talk to him. And so I spent about 10 minutes talking with Troy Dannon. I've shared this a little bit on Slack, but I've known Troy for 25 years. And when I was a principal over in Southern Iowa at Creston, Troy was the executive director of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union. And I won't go into all the depth and the background of our relationship. No, I didn't know him well enough that we trade, Christmas cards. I don't know him that well, but it was my first chance to go talk to him. And we talked for a while, and we talked about some mutual friends of ours and caught up on a few things. But he said something he said 2 things I'll share here that really struck me. The first thing that he said that I think is value has value is winning is important at Nebraska in every sport and in everything they do. And he'd been the AD at UNI, Tulane, and Washington. And he said, this is the first place where he's been an athletic director where winning matters. And winning is what drives every aspect of each of the teams and the programs. He referenced being at Washington where they played for a national championship, won a national championship in one of their minor sports. And he says by the next day, it was all forgotten. And he said at Nebraska, winning is important. And he said that makes his job so much easier because he works with those kind of driven people. So that made me feel pretty good. And the other thing that he said was that in his occupation, athletic director, college athletic director, he said Nebraska is easily a top 10 program. He said, I wouldn't say they're a top 5, but they're definitely a top 10 program. And he said anybody would be foolish not to want to be the athletic director at the University of Nebraska. He said it speaks for itself. And he said, I'm so happy to be here. And he said, with that, he assumes a lot of responsibility. So that was nice to hear from him when we were talking. I'll just throw one other thing. He said, I'm so glad to be back at a college that has wrestling. He said, I've missed wrestling for so many years. He had wrestling when he was at UNI. He grew up in Marshalltown, Iowa, around wrestling. And so he's really jazzed to be at Nebraska with the wrestling program. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
That is so nice. I love that. And you've known him for 25 years?
Yeah, probably. I was principal at Creston, from 2003. So yeah, 20, not 25, 20, yeah.
Okay.
So over 20 years.
Wow.
We had my assistant principal and AD at the school where I was the principal. Kurt Olson was a legend. He was a larger than life, legendary figure. And he and Troy were very good friends. And so I kind of got hauled along, if you will, a little bit, a few times. So, yeah.
Aww.
Yeah.
I just wanted one comment and then we'll get out of here. I didn't notice this at first, and Fred Sacco pointed it out. He says, oh shit, I just noticed Todd has a boob light. Are you familiar with boob lights?
I have no idea what a boob light is.
Well, you have one. And it's in your it's in your background. It's hanging from the ceiling. It's a light that looks
that
yes.
thing?
Yeah.
I had not looked at it that well. Fred, now you've got me disturbed.
Oh, that is just too funny.
I'll have to work on a background because I also got the drinking Santa that my wife just, when they put all the Christmas stuff on sale, she bought this.
She got that for you.
It's not Yingling, but it could be. We could pretend it is.
Yeah, we'll just write it in.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Todd, for joining us tonight, and you are welcome back here anytime.
Well,
as I will be figuring this out on Monday nights.
Okay.
It's like your homecoming. And thank you all for your fantastic comments tonight. I appreciate each one of you for sharing your insights and love for the Huskers. Your voices matter in this community. Until next time, let's continue to lift each other up and go Big Red.